Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Your Top 10 Demand Gen Questions Answered. My name is Andrea Goodkind, and I'm BrightTALK's Senior Marketing Manager here in London, and I'll be taking you through the presentation today. Just before we get started, I wanted to mention that if you do have any questions during today's session, please do ask them. I'm monitoring them, and I can take a look at them, and I'll answer them in the presentation and towards the end as well. Also, please do leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear more about your questions that you might have and what else you'd like to see on the Academy and how we can always improve. And lastly, just to mention each of the 10 questions that we will be going through today, we've listed the link to a larger webinar that's focused on that specific topic. Because today, of course, I'm going to do some highlights for you and give you a good succinct answer on all of the questions. But if you do want any further in-depth answers, then all of the 10 webinars that we've taken these questions today from are listed there. Okay, so let's get into the presentation. So again, just to kind of explain where this topic today came from is the BrightTALK marketing team has published more than 100 webinars on the BrightTALK Academy in the past year, and we get so many great questions during each of these sessions, and many of them can be grouped into similar topics or functions. So what we've done is we've taken the top 10 questions asked in the past year and tried to put them all into one place for you. And so whether you're new to marketing and demand generation, or if you're an expert, today I'll walk through some of the basic questions and some advanced topics, just to give everybody a good overview and a great understanding of these top questions asked. Okay, so to group everything all together, what we're going to look at today is kind of the three main pain points that we've heard over the past years. And what we've done is we're going to look at lead generation, content, and demand generation. So let's start with lead gen first of all. And now the first question we have here is, how do I identify leads who are more qualified? Well, I think the simple answer is really lead scoring. According to multiple research firms, nearly 70% of marketers say that lead scoring is the most responsible factor for improving revenue. Now that's huge, but at the same time, about 86% of marketers who do use lead scoring as part of their demand gen strategy, well, nearly half said that these initiatives needed improvement. So what we can take from that is, yes, you have to do lead scoring, but it's always going to be something you're going to need to look at, monitor, so you can shape and improve so it works best for you and your organization. And a bit more detail on this is that make sure that you're including your sales team in this process. And be, of course, sure that you've had that initial conversation of defining what is a marketing qualified lead and what is a sales qualified lead. You want to make sure that the sales team and the marketing teams agree on both of those definitions before you get started and create this whole involved lead scoring methodology. Once you do have that conversation, then you want to look at both behavioral or engagement scoring and demographic scoring. So I'm sure we've all seen some leads come into your systems who are just so engaged, and they've subscribed to your blog, they've downloaded multiple pieces of content, but yet they're a student based in a country that you're not targeting. So this is the perfect example of why you need both demographic and engagement scoring. And while this is happening, it's necessary to capture all of this data in your marketing automation system so you can then push the most engaged leads to the front line and leveraging your CRM system, whichever one you're using, to then be contacted by sales. You'll then want to reevaluate this criteria regularly. So I've seen lots of different thought leaders recommend that you look at your lead scoring even daily. I've seen some say quarterly or annually. it really just depends on what works best for your team. If you're suddenly seeing a surge of really poor leads, well then immediately take a look at your scoring. If you're just noticing a small peak, well, take a look at that as well and see what good is coming from this and how can you adjust your scoring to let more come through. The second question here is it necessary for landing pages to be responsive? Well, definitely yes is the short answer for that. So if you want to deliver your message to your target audience, you need to adapt it for all of the devices that they might be using. For example, if your target buyer is, let's say, on the train to work and does actually click through your email campaign, only to come to a landing page that they can't actually load or can't comprehend due to the formatting errors, well, what good is that? You need to remember that we're so mobile focused these days, and that your buyers are on all sorts of devices, which are various shapes and screen sizes, even Apple Watches. So you need to keep this in mind and remember that getting to your landing page is the potential for the ultimate conversion. And a responsive design will allow your users to complete the action that you're hoping that they will. So whether it's downloading the white paper, requesting a demo, buying a product, or so on. It essentially automatically adapts to your visitor's screen so that the images, forms, call to action buttons, everything is in the correct resolution and size, and that it's also in the right layout for that specific device. And as you can imagine, I'm sure this is something that Google highly recommends for your pages to rank high for SEO. So many marketing automation platforms now leverage responsive landing pages and templates, but you can also leverage design firms and third parties to create them for you, should you not have the internal resource to help create these. And then just remember, if you're creating them, always test. So before a landing page goes out to your broad database, well, test it on as many devices as you have. Ask your team, ask family at home. Whoever can potentially just test it and give you a quick opinion, I think that's absolutely ideal to keep in mind. Okay, our third question here is, how many webinars does it take to start seeing traction with an audience? And now this, according to our 2016 Global Benchmarks report on webinars, hosting an average of 1 to 2 webinars per month is truly optimum. We've found a direct correlation between the more content that you have, the more subscribers or prospects that you'll get. And what we have seen clients get is about 180% more subscribers on their channels for having between 21 to 50 pieces of content versus just 1 to 5 pieces of content. So it's a huge jump. And again, if you're hosting webinars, if you're doing all this for lead generation to get as many good, high quality leads as you possibly can, well, consider having more content on your channels. And hopefully this number doesn't scare you. I just want to point that out as well, is I think even with very limited resources, you can certainly work up to this 1 to 2 webinars per month and beyond. And what really helps with that is repurposing what's already in your hands. So you might have lots of kind of older webinars or even, older white papers, I meant to say, even new ones, infographics, blogs, really even some internal PowerPoint presentation that your sales team might be using. Well, repurpose this content and turn it into webinars. Our fourth question here is, should you include qualification questions within a registration form? Now, I think first what you need to think about is the end goal for the piece of content that you're using the form for. Is it an early stage piece of thought leadership, or is it more of a late stage product demo? Using questions like, would you like to have a demo for this product within your form is really great, but consider using it only if you're offering, let's say, a guide on your specific product specifications, for example. Then you know somebody is really interested in your exact product, what it does, how it helps, and how to integrate, let's say. Well, then they might be much more inclined to say, yes, I want a demo at the same time as getting all this information in their hands. And usually lots of form fields tend to put people off from completing it, so definitely keep that in mind when creating your forms for the piece of content, or if it is a webinar you're creating. Just always ask kind of what you have to ask, and then prioritize the things that are nice to have. So the question on, would you like a demo? Well, yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it would be great to know. But 9 times out of 10, if it's a white paper that the promotion is for, or if it's a webinar, someone will ask you and follow up afterwards if they do want that demo. Moving on to content. Question 5 is, what should be my ratio of evergreen content versus new content? And I think what you have to start with here is categorizing your content for repurposing. So before you can do this, of course, you need to make sure that you do have an organized content library. Have this as an outlet for links to PDFs, the dates that they were published, what persona the piece of content fits to, which stage of the buying cycle it might work towards, and any performance metrics. So you have this as kind of a base to look back on for all of the content that you've ever created, and then, of course, building it for the future. So here you should also label what is evergreen and repurposable versus more of the one-off stuff. And then, of course, how much content are you producing, and what do you want to produce? How relevant do you want to be? How kind of always up with the times? Things like an annual benchmark report can be used over and over and over again within the year, and then even after the year. But do you want to refresh it with new data for the next time? I'd say as a good rule of thumb, it's probably best to have 1/3 of your content to be evergreen. Question 6 now is, how do you stand out from the crowd when there are so many events and webinars taking place? There are lots of different things you can do here, and I'd say one example is use partners. So partners can bring not just kind of their name and their logo, but their expertise, their specific thought leaders, any content, and their promotions list, so they can help promote the webinar or the event with you. It creates that brand recognition of your partnership with somebody else in the market space. Now, of course, keep in mind, sometimes partners come at a cost, so make sure you do discuss this up front if it's something that you're considering. Next, you can leverage unique promotions. So for some companies, social can be a really great place to be a bit more creative and to use your kind of thinking outside the box to send these social shares out there into the world. And it's really where you can capture the attention of people that might not already be on your radar. And then lastly, think about giveaways. So giveaways are really cool, and it's a great incentive for a webinar or event. Let's say you say the first 10 people to show up live get this free book from our thought leader who is co-presenting with us today, or the first 100 people to register, something like that. But again, keep in mind this can be expensive depending on what you're giving away. But if it's a partner that you might be working with, maybe that's part of the deal you work on, that you get to give these away for free in order for them to be a partner for you. It's all stuff you can negotiate, but cool ways that you can make your webinar or event stand out from the crowd. Okay. Question 7 here is, how do you make a testimonial sound genuine and compelling? Well, I think it's a simple equation here, you want to make sure that you're giving your customer the opportunity to tell their own experience from their own perspective. So while I'm sure we all love to prep questions and send them ahead of time, give them enough kind of time to write down some things, make some notes, that's great. But if you can, let's say, get them in a room, sit down and just have a conversation, maybe record it so you can then transcribe it later. You'll get some much more candid thoughts and really hearing it from their perspective and then seeing the words come through after you transcribe it. I think that's what really creates that the candid story, no staging, so no advanced setup. And that's what gives you this really authentic story. The same thing goes if it's not, let's just say, a written case study, if you're doing a video testimonial. Well, again, in this case, you might want to prep the questions, send them ahead of time, but then just get somebody in the room together, have kind of a video interview going on. And I think if you work with a video producer, they can really help you to make sure the interviewer and the interviewee are happy, calm, prepared for these questions, and really just, it's a candid, open conversation. Okay, moving on to our final category here is demand generation. And question 8 is, how many buyer personas should I have? I think the key to understanding this is understanding the makeup of your buyers and your influencers, and then developing personas for each one. So it's really hard to generalize how many personas each company should have, but as a rule of thumb, I'd probably say as few as possible. Therefore, you can focus all of your efforts on the main stakeholders that are in your buying process, and really focus the content that you're going to create for their needs and wants. And overall, this development of personas, it's essentially, if you need to have an effective demand generation motion, you need to know who your buyers are. And it's going to be impossible for you to just create content out of the blue without knowing who you're going to create it for. Because if the content is not aligned to that buyer, well, it's not going to garner any investment on their time, and then it's not going to create conversions and ultimately new business for you. So this buyer-centric view of demand generation is really the only way to ensure this effectiveness. And questions to think about here is, well, again, who are the buyers and influencers? How many markets are you targeting? Maybe someone in EMEA has different wants than someone in Asia or in America or South America. It can be very different. And then, of course, how many product lines or service lines do you have? Do you need to create a persona type for each one, or do you have just an overall buyer and an influencer? Question 9 here is, how can I improve the quality of my leads? And I think we went through this a bit with kind of lead scoring, which is the third bullet point here. But just to start, make sure that you're sending your promotions by buyer persona and by buying stage. So this is absolutely necessary. You know, I think what we just discussed on buyer personas truly resonates here, is that you want to make sure you're giving your audience what they want. Even if you need to kind of take a poll of what they're looking for, or have interview current customers and see kind of what actually made them come to you, what helped push them over the edge to become a customer. Having that kind of targeted information and knowledge will really help you create the content that you need to have personal content for each buyer or each role that you're going after. And then your promotions as well. So make sure, it's kind of simple now, make sure that you're sending these email promotions in the right time zone, in the right language, and make sure that it's easy. These days, all the different marketing automation platforms, you can use tokens to pull in their first name. So it'll say, "Hi, Andrea," instead of "Hello," which it's a little thing like that, but it makes a really big difference when I receive a marketing email that is customized to me and it's content that I really do want. Next, I think no matter how good your tracking is in your CRM system, I think it's absolutely key to set up regular sales and marketing meetings on lead quality to understand the leads accepted in the past week or the past month, whatever the cadence that you'd prefer. Well, what really made them good? Was it a specific industry, a certain job level, a certain company size that was really the sweet spot? And then at the same time, of the leads that were rejected by the sales team or were marked as, let's say, bad data, if you have that option, well, what made it bad? Was it a demographic reason, or were they just not ready to buy? Did they have no budget? Was it the wrong industry? Again, this will really help you gather more of the good leads and less of the bad leads when you have this specific information. And then, as I mentioned, just refresh your lead scoring. You don't need to look at it daily, but if it's something that's critical for you and it's something you're just starting out, maybe check it on a weekly basis until it's something that you find that is working and that you're looking to improve. And just on this note as well, there was the B2B lead generation trends report. They noted that some of the top 5 effective tactics in high-quality leads included email, SEO, and webinars. So make sure you're including those 3 options when you can and if it fits your demand gen strategy. Our next question here is, how is sales involved in demand generation? And I think this starts really with marketing and sales alignment. So here are some things that you can do to improve marketing and sales alignment. What you want to do is make sure that you're defining your lead gen strategy together. Make sure it's something you're sitting down to agree that both sales teams and the marketing teams are happy with what marketing plans to do. You can leverage an SDR team or sales development representative. They can kind of be the middle person between marketing and sales. So they would be the people who receive the leads from marketing, and they're that kind of first touch approach. So they would be the ones to qualify or disqualify before something would be passed on to a sales representative. And then, of course, establish regular conversations. So if you can have a weekly just stand-up chat, something informal, say, "Hey, how was the week? Any good points, bad points, challenging questions?" Kind of just get a feel for the team, what they're finding, and how you can help each other. And then I think it's really important, if you can, potentially, maybe if you have a relationship with the sales team, maybe your marketer can join their sales team meetings on a weekly basis, or maybe it's once a month that the marketer joins the sales team, and vice versa. Have a member of the sales team join your marketing team meeting every once in a while. It could be weekly, if that's too much. It could be once a month. However you see fit, just so each team can get a better understanding of what the team's goals are, what the focus is, any challenges, and how they then might be able to take that information back to the rest of their team and improve the methods that they're working on. The last point here is evaluate your sales funnel. So the image on the right is from Marketo, and I think it's a really interesting image on what is the, let's say, traditional sales funnel, and then on the right, it's more of the revenue cycle. So Marketo is suggesting taking away that sales funnel, and it's an entire revenue cycle, because marketing and sales work so closely together, and with digital and all these different online buying cycles these days, the funnel is really changing. And of course, this depends on which industry you're in and company. overall, but it's something really interesting just to make sure that both sales and marketing agree that which stage should each team touch, and which stage should they agree on certain SLAs that should be established or certain questions that come in. At what point is a lead marketing qualified versus when is it sales qualified? Okay, and then just some points here is if you do leverage kind of an SDR team, or if your first point of touch is your sales team, then there are a couple of different things that you can look at, whether you have an inbound motion, which is some notes here. So make sure your marketing team is passing on information like, well, this lead watched a webinar for 40 minutes, or they were looking at a solution on the web page for a couple of months now. If they asked certain information during a product demo, well, make sure all of that information is fed through to your inbound team, so their conversations are deeper, they're more meaningful, and they're really tailored to the person themselves. And then, of course, for the outbound team, the same thing goes. Make sure they're prepared. Make sure you have this direct correlation between the content you're producing for the industries they might be going after. And then, of course, with thought leadership and industry content, with how social salespeople and marketers are becoming these days, keep in mind your team really needs to share a 1-to-3 ratio of industry-related content to create noise in the market space. Okay, so these were our top 10 questions and answers today. If you do have any questions, I see a couple coming through now. Be sure to ask them. Also, leave us some feedback, and then remember, in the attachments and links section, what I've done is each of the 10 questions we've gone through today, they have a corresponding in-depth webinar for even more information. So have a browse through there. As long as you're on our platform, everything should come up just quick and easily, and you can see much more information there. Okay, so I have some questions here on what is the optimal lead gen webinar length. Oh, I love this question. I think it truly depends. I think people's attention spans are shorter and shorter these days. So like today we have a 30-minute webinar, and I'm sure I'm probably unfortunately going to run out of time for all the questions coming through. But if it's something short and sweet, try 30 minutes. I think once you go beyond 45, 60 minutes, including Q&A time, you're really pushing people's attention spans. And certain platforms let you see kind of where your drop-off points are. So you can test a 30-minute webinar and test a 60-minute webinar just to see at what point do people actually log in, and then at what point do they drop off. That drop-off point is exactly where you want to focus. And another stat from our webinar benchmarks report, which is included in the attachments and links here, it's the first attachment there. The average webinar viewing time for the EMEA audience was 36 minutes. So plan your webinars around that time is, I would say, the ideal length. Okay. Looking at the rest of the questions here. How would you recommend that a graduate learns to use these lead gen tools? I am due to graduate this month. Well, first, congratulations. And second, I think there's so much you can do. Follow some thought leaders on Twitter and LinkedIn. Attend more BrightTALK webinars. We have lots of different thought leadership information on lead generation, marketing overall. Take a look at the other people that are interacting on BrightTALK that you can view when you're registering for webinars. And then, of course, look at the thought leaders that you follow on social. See what their priorities are. Take a look at the hottest topics out there, and then do kind of some small research on what what to follow, what's key trends. I love to follow kind of Marketo, HubSpot, all the marketing automation platforms out there. They have some really great content. So I think that's a really good start. Okay, I do see quite a few more questions coming in right now. We are at the cutoff time, so I do apologize for running a bit over today. If I haven't gotten to your question, I will follow up with you via email today. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, please do leave us some feedback, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the BrightTALK Academy.